Hi everyone, this video is going to help you with lesson 7, revisiting percentages and solving an equation that includes percent. So I have an example here for you guys. It's 30% of A equals 120. So let's just say that in the town of Felton right now, 30% of all the kids that play Fortnite are online, and that number is 120. A represents the total number of kids that play Fortnite, and we know that 30% of that is 120. So let's figure out how many kids are playing Fortnite altogether. The way that we do that is we want to solve this equation, and we do that just like we do any other equation. We try and isolate the variable. So let's try and isolate this variable. Remember, when we talk about percent, that a percent is part of a whole. So 30% is actually just 30 out of 100. Okay, we can also represent this as a decimal, but right now we'll just use it as a fraction. The word of tells me that I need to multiply. So I'm going to put this dot here, because algebra we use the dot to imply multiplication rather than the x, because sometimes when we see the x, we think it's a variable, or we think it's multiplication and it's a variable. So let's keep moving on and transferring this into an equation. All right, hopefully you're following along with me. Now that I've written my problem as an equation, I can try and solve it. 30% multiplied by A equals 120. Now remember, when we're solving equations, we try and isolate the variable, which is right here. We do that by doing the inverse of what the operation is telling us. So if we see the multiplication sign, to isolate the variable, we get rid of this 30 over 100 by doing the inverse of multiplication, which is division. Now, don't get overwhelmed because it's a fraction and we're dividing. The way that we divide a fraction is just by doing multiplying by the reciprocal. So the reciprocal is when we have the denominator over the numerator. You can see that here. Now we can cancel out because 100 goes into 100, 30 goes into 30, and they cancel. But remember, when we're working with equations, what we do to one side of the equation, we also need to do to the other. So we'll bring down our A here, and we'll multiply by the reciprocal on the other side of the equation. So we'll multiply 120 by the reciprocal, which is 100 over 30. All right. Now, before we go and multiply, we always want to look at our fractions and say, can we simplify these fractions? Can this number 1 go into 100? Yes, it goes in 100 times. And can the number 30 be divided into 120? Yes. We know from our facts of multiplication that 3 is a multiple of 12. So 30 most certainly will go into 120. That's right, because 3 times 4 is 12. 30 can go into 120 40 times. Now to solve, all we do is finish multiplying across. We do 40 times 100, which equals 4,000. Just add the zeros. We don't even need to do any algorithms here. So we can go back and check. See, 30% of 4,000 is 120. Let's see. Well, 10% of 1,000, I know if I just move the decimal, 10% of 4,000 is 400. And if I multiply 400 3 times, 3 groups of 400, that will give me 120. So this is a true equation. We did a great job. And hopefully this video helps you think about how you're going to solve. So the first step is to write as an equation, just like I did here. The second step is to figure out what we're doing. So here we're multiplying. If you're multiplying fractions, the way that we do that is we divide. So we can, when we're dividing fractions, we multiply by the reciprocal. And we do that to both sides of the equation, and then we can solve. Remember to always, once you have your answer here, like I did, 4,000, we can try and plug that in and say, if I plug this answer into A, 30% of A, which is 4,000, will that give me 120? Yes, it does. So then I know my answer is correct. All right, well, we'll do another video in a moment. Hopefully this little video helps you think about how you can solve an equation with a percent. See you tomorrow.